All right, this is going to be interesting. For those of you that know me, I don't do short very well, so buckle in. All right, this clicker, yeah. All right, so what are the Diné? You most likely know us more by what we're going by in English, which is Navajo. The Navajo Nation is the largest federally recognized Native American tribe in the United States. The reservation itself covers some almost 30,000 square miles in the U.S. Southwest and comprises more than 400,000 members, one of which whom is here today talking to you. And if you do know anything about Navajos, one of the things that you might be familiar with is that we have a really strong rug weaving tradition that is in turn linked to a very, very strong and several centuries old sheep herding tradition. Indeed, sometimes when you're going around the res, you'll often hear people, or you'll see a phrase that's Diné Pastoral, which is sheep is life. This tradition that I referred to is very strong, but it has a complex history. And so if you look on the lower left here, you'll note there's a sort of rough schematic of kind of the timeline, these peaks and troughs of sheep counts as best we can kind of guesstimate over the past few centuries in the Southwest in terms of Navajo people. And it's a tradition that's very much alive. But one of the most intriguing things, I think, for me is that if you actually look at the left side of this little graph, right, it's a tradition that starts essentially out of nothing, because under the Western tradition, right, sheep, other Western domesticates weren't introduced to the Americas until white people showed up in the 16th century. And in the case of New Mexico, that didn't start until 1598 when the Spanish established the colony of New Mexico, which is, we have, nope, all right. Which, if you draw your attention to the map, is really just the Rio Grande River Valley, kind of modern day Albuquerque and Santa Fe. What we're going to talk about, though, is the roots of this, which start in the area known as the Netra. So what's going on in early Navajo communities in terms of herding? Well, one of the clearest things, right, is that there is this juxtaposition. It's not happening under what we would traditionally describe as a colonial framework. The Spanish don't really extend their power beyond the Rio Grande River Valley. They colonize and control other tribes who live in that area, but more mobile peoples, people that were sort of beyond the extent of a day's, easy trip, maintained a level of freedom that distinguished themselves from these otherwise controlled groups. And Navajos were one of these groups. Now, if we look at the early colonial period, the 1700s, we can see several of the ways in which people are doing this. They are maintaining independence through a variety of sort of internal and external political and economic schemes, including overt resistance in the term, in terms of building fortresses to protect local communities. That's sort of the more obvious example, right? But also in economic terms, embracing the introduction of sheep and horses to continue to transform a mobile kind of hunter-gatherer lifestyle into a mobile herding lifestyle. And the fascinating thing is that as an archaeologist, we know they're doing this because we can see evidence of bones, but there's not enough for us to actually dive into these dynamics and understand how it's really influencing day-to-day life. We can see bones, and we can even see corrals. You can make out the faint sort of circular alignment of an area that's, maybe 10 meters in diameter. But for essentially a century of American archaeological work, we've not had a good sense of actually how this was working on the ground. And so a lot of my research is focused on teasing out these dynamics as to how herding enables early Navajo communities to remain free. And so we can see that one of the ways we can do this is look at the 20th century and see the ways in which people historically responded to American colonial strategies designed to control Navajo people, and use that logic to help us look at the earlier moments in the Southwest, which again, we don't know that much about. And why is this important? Well, this idea of landscapes is, at least in anthropology, the co-created interplay between culture, society, and the physical environment. So my landscape is different from yours. And it's a landscape that in the Southwest, people have tried to curtail in part by dispossessing indigenous people of land and ending in favor of, coal, uranium, other sorts of extractive power, But as we've seen, these are things that pass us by. But in contrast, this herding legacy remains quite strong, and you see people returning to it even as these extractive industries, which have shown up, remove land, have in turn kind of gone by. They last a decade or two at the most, but people are still herding today, and they're often returning to those traditional life ways that are attached to it. And I think this is really quite fascinating, and find me afterwards, we can talk more.